just to provide a brief overview about what the EPQ project entails, and well, this should be beneficial for those of you that might want to take this next year. In very simple words, it requires you to finish a 5,000-word essay at the end of it, or you can do an artifact, and along with that you can do about 2,000 words worth of essay. And I think this project allows you to really get an insight into something that you are passionate about and would possibly like to pursue a career in. So it will help you to make a good decision for which kind of degree you want to go for university. And for those of you that are also doing humanitarian subjects such as RS or history, it will have a huge impact on your essay writing skills, as you'll be able to critically analyze texts, and that would really help you better your grade. So the initial ideas would be revolving around two individuals known as Rumi and Al-Ghazali. These two individuals I had come across at a very early age, being brought up in Pakistan, and the kind of respect these two figures have so I was already introduced to some of their work. Rumi was born in an area near Afghanistan, which was at that time part of the Persian Empire, but because of the threat of the Mughal Empire, they had to move out, and they moved to Turkey at that time. And Turkey was a place where different religions would come to integrate there, like such as Judaism, Hinduism, and Christianity and Islam. So they were all kind of integrated there. That's the kind of upbringing Rumi had. His father was a Sufi leader of that area, and my interest in itself was with these two individuals and the transformation which Sufism had given both of these individuals. So Rumi, from a very young age, had been taught by his father how to become a theological thinker, and he was quite clever. So he had memorized many of the texts. He was fully prepared to take on that role after his father has died. But upon a journey to a different town, he encountered another man by the name Shams Tabriz, and this was one of those people that would be on top of mountains meditating all the time. He's one of those very rough, people. And Rumi had a cart full of books behind him at that time. So as he's going, Shams Tabriz jumps, and they were going over a bridge. So Shams Tabriz throws all the books off the bridge. So at that time, Rumi is shocked. This is work that he's acquired the past few years, and how on earth could you just throw this and disregard it as if it's nothing? And Shams Tabriz told him that you yourself are worth nothing. Everything you are is in these books. You're nothing yourself. So this led to the inward journey for Rumi, and he decided to spend a lot more times with Shams Tabriz. And that inward development was what I was interested in, because that was interlinked with Sufism. So I decided to see where I could gain this research from. And the most beautiful thing is, most of his autobiography is presented in the form of poetry. And I would highly recommend a book by the name Masnavi, which is a compilation of all his poetry and also stories which all have a moral message at the end. I would highly recommend reading that. It's really long. I mean, one of his poems is about 32,000 words long, so, but it's absolutely brilliant. This is just some of the quotes which I had compiled together. And the statistics show, I read an article in 2014 that he was the most sought after poet in USA. So that just shows that the message he's trying to get across is universal, and it tends to pierce the heart of anyone, for those that do have a heart. Now, unfortunately, despite my passion for Rumi and his poetry, I encountered some major problems, which included the language barrier. Now, the issue is, most of Rumi's text is in Urdu or Persian, and I can speak Urdu, but as many of the philosophy students here will know, that the text these philosophers tend to write is the most complex form possible. So it was very difficult to comprehend what he was trying to say in Urdu, despite getting help from the local imam who had a master's in Urdu. Even he was struggling to kind of grasp an idea of what was going on. So I decided, because in the EPQ essay, you can't just write a story about what you're passionate about. You need to be able to critically analyze it. You need to be able to show the pros and cons, what other scholars think about this person, whether he was significant or not. I can't just write a story saying how beautiful his poems are. So that was an issue I had encountered. So to overcome this, I thought I would try to focus more on Al-Ghazali, who was another figure. And the most bizarre thing was, when I started reading Al-Ghazali, the stories were so similar that I was astounded by that fact. Al-Ghazali was also brought up in a similar context. His father taught him. And he also encountered a thief during a journey to another city. And this thief also pretty much said that exact same thing, and that led him to the realization that, you know, these notes that he didn't have books, he just had notes at that time, which I had taken the past few years, that without these notes, my worth is nothing. So, but the advantage I had this time, there's a lot of literature available in English, which I would be able to analyze and then ultimately write an essay upon. So this time, I was able to hold grasp of books, which I would be able to analyze, such as Ihya al-Ulum. And now, the significance of Al-Ghazali in Islam is just phenomenal. Islamic jurist actually mentioned this quote here, that, you know, if earthquake or a flood was to happen and all of Islamic literature was to disappear, then one of his book, Ihya al-Ulum, which consists of 40 volumes, would be sufficient to suffice all of them. I mean, that speaks volumes of what kind of importance Al-Ghazali had, and it shows how comprehensive this book was, because it literally had everything from how a person should live, mentioning all the theological aspects and the spiritual aspects of the religion in itself. So that was a book I was definitely going to get into, and then to a suitable title that was linked with Al-Ghazali and Sufism. So then I decided the best thing to concentrate upon was his own transformation into the Sufi sect. Because he was brought up, he was a very intelligent person, as he was picked up by his teacher Al-Juwayni at a young age. And so he memorized all the scriptures at that time, and, you know, he was the head professor in the University of Baghdad, which could be compared to like Oxford or Cambridge of this time. So he was the head professor there. But then after this encounter with this thief, he had this, you know, he went through this skeptic period, a life crisis. And the life crisis got so bad that he was just unable to speak. He was mentioned that one of his class, in front of all his students, he just couldn't speak anymore. His tongue was just stuck, so he just ran out of the class, and he was seeking this something to heal him of this kind of mental crisis. And the best way to do this was through Sufism. So how was it that he went around to heal himself up? Now, another book which I would very heavily recommend, so the next slide I'll go back, where is it? Yeah, here. Is this book called The Deliverance from Error. And this book is basically his autobiography of how this crisis started and how he overcame this life crisis. And obviously it would take far longer than the time I have to discuss that in depth, but I will give a very brief overview of the kind of stuff that he went through. So he decided to analyze the 4 different groups which were present in his time, the philosophers, the Sufis, and 2 different Arabic, very difficult Arabic names which I don't remember very well. So he decided to analyze all of these 4 groups and see which one would be able to heal him, which one would cure this problem that he was going through. And he decided that it was Sufism who were the masters of the art which were able to heal this problem he was having. And the problem in itself was understanding the world around him. And because he was just rationalizing about everything, and he was seeing everything through logic, he wasn't using the other language, the language of the heart. And that's what he mentioned that Sufis are using. And the Sufis were concentrating more of the inner parts of a person rather than trying to rationalize everything about them. And therefore, he wanted to experience things to believe in them. So in essence, you could say he was a bit of an empiricist, because without experience, he would not believe in things. So the Sufi way of thought allowed him to, in essence, experience God and other things, which led to his transformation. And because of that, and as I've aforementioned his significance in Islam, because of that, Sufism was able to gain a lot of prominent support at that time, because there were many scholars who did not believe that Sufism was the right way, and in fact it was leading people astray from Islam at that time. So it was because of Al-Ghazali that Sufism was able to gain prominence. And that's what I wanted to analyze, that, you know, if the aspects of Sufism and Al-Ghazali interlinked. And at that time, I also came across many of the criticisms that Sufism faced then, and it continues to face now. Majority of the Muslim world consists of Sunnis, and it is very common view of the scholars in the Sunni Islam world that Sufism has things which are not linked with Islam, and they lead a person to go astray from Islam. A prime example of this would be the notion of a pir. A pir is basically a saint, and is recommended by Sufis to have this pir, and they'll help you throughout your life to guide you. The saint would guide you and provide you with the kind of, in a way, a more compass for you to follow. But the Sunni Muslims believe that, this is absurd. There's no mention of this in the Quran or anywhere else or in the Holy Scripture. So where are these Sufis? Where are they coming with these things of? And the fact that you can feel God or anything in relation to that, many Sufis go to the extent of saying that it's shirk. So anyone who believes in this, they're actually non-Muslims. So that's why some Sufis by the name Hafiz, etc., have been classed as non-Muslims by the Sunni sects. And there are many other things which also Sufis participate in, such as dancing around. And I mean, it's not really dancing and break dancing or anything of that form. It's just simply whirling around. And this trip perhaps began with the Rumi. I think I should have mentioned this, that when after the death of Shams Tabriz, he was very much emotionally broke down, and that's when he said most of his poetry. And all he would do all day is, there was a pole, and he would just grab onto it and then just whirl around it, and he would just start reciting poetry. I mean, he was in a deep pain at that time, deep moment of sorrow, because him and Shams Tabriz had such a strong relationship, and since that bond had broken, he had left him emotionally broken as well. So he would just recite poetry while dancing around in that manner, and all these students would take down all the notes possible. And that's where the compilation of the Muslim came around. So that's this dancing. But most Sunni Muslims believe this is absurd, this is against Islam, none of this exists. Such as music as well, they used to play this blues, etc. to really get the feeling, and Muslims completely deny this most. Now, coming on to the research material, as I've before mentioned, one of the books which I would heavily recommend is The Deliverance from Error, and it is translated in English for you. And the best thing about it is there's nothing all that complex. He hasn't used the most complex words possible to try to get a message across. It's just been simple and straightforward. So I would really recommend that book for you. These are other books which I used to for my research. The Ihya al-Ulum is huge. Like I aforementioned, it's 40 volumes. So I was only able to read some little sections of it which were related to Sufism. And that really gave me an insight of how Al-Ghazali perceived Sufism and other philosophers at that time as well. And another issue I was having throughout this period was the title. So Ian was able to help me at that time because he has also studied his philosophers in his university, so he was able to give me some really helpful advice as to what I can do and what kind of research material I should look into, which would eventually help me come up with a title. And no doubt it did help. If you are interested in getting a better understanding of who Al-Ghazali is, before reading the books, I would highly recommend watching one of the documentaries by either Abdul Hakim Murad, Hamza Yusuf, or Yasir Kadir. There is a 2-hour documentary which has all three of these guys together. They've got together and made a documentary. I think it's called Al-Ghazali, the Pursuit of something. And if you do email me, I will get you the link of that documentary. It's brilliant. It goes through all of his life. So I would recommend that highly for all of you. As aforementioned, some of the difficulties faced was the title in itself, which I overcame by seeing my supervisor and the advice he gave me, and by intensely contemplating upon the research material which I had gained. I was able to eventually decide upon a suitable title. Another thing which was heavily suffering was my organizational and time management skills, which I believe I have nearly mastered with the help of Ian and keeping a journal. And I believe this will not only help me in my university, but other aspects of life as well as I go on to work. So that was one huge crisis, I may say, for myself, which I had to overcome. As I said, because there are many different sources available online, it is very important to see which is the most reliable or the authentic source. So the 2 sessions which were given were able to help me recognize which sources would be the best to use for my essay eventually. And so those were some of the benefits of the 2 sessions. Another benefit was also the hard referencing. I was able to reference everything in an adequate manner during my essay. And this will, I'm sure, will help me later on in my university life as well if I am to write another essay at some time. Like I said, my management and organizational skills were lacking, but with the advice of Ian to keep a journal, which I should update on a weekly basis. By following that advice, I was able to overcome this issue. And another problem I did have was organizing the meetings on a weekly basis. I was very poor at that. So we were not able to have as many meetings as I would have wanted, or as Ian would have wanted. But I overcame that problem also by working extra hard. And making the most of the sessions which I did have with Ian. I think one of the most important aspects of the EPQ is the production log, and one must ensure that they add as much information as possible, because that will determine a huge chunk of your grade. So the review I was receiving from Ian was really helpful for me to further develop on the points which I was making at first. They were not as developed, so with his feedback I was able to write more on top of that. So the overall review of this full project basically led not only to an academic development but also a personal development about things. I believe that it is very important for someone to not hold the view that the author of the book can never be wrong before they start reading that text. And that is perhaps the perception I had of some of these scholars before I started reading them, especially Al-Ghazali, because he held such a high status. I thought that he could never possibly make a mistake in any of his work. But with the critical analysis I have done during my essay and the study of other philosophers, I've come to the conclusion that, in fact, yes, there are some flaws in his work which need to be handled, and they have been handled by some scholars, some more effectively than others. And so it gave me a far better insight into Sufism and these philosophers themselves, and whether I would like to pursue a future career which involved philosophy and these philosophers themselves. Okay, this slide was going to be mostly focused on those that were going to take the EPQ next year, of which no one is here. So. But still, sorry, forgive me. I'm being against. And basically, I have one advice for you is to avoid procrastination. So basically, I'm sure you're already aware of this term, but if you're not, it's leaving things for later. So if you have to fill in your journal today, you say, I'm going to do it tomorrow or the day after. Don't leave it for that. If you have the opportunity and the time to do it straight away. Don't leave anything for later. And that's not just for the EPQ. That's something you should implement in your daily life. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, please